What do you think it was like back in the day walking into a hotel knowing Frank Sinatra might be around the corner or that JFK might be giving a speech in the ballroom? Well, hey there, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Old Florida Now. I'm your host, Bo Carter. And today's topic, oh man, it's a big one. We're going to talk about a building that was more than just a hotel. It was a symbol, a stage for legends, a political hotspot, and get this, a place where the Beatles once performed live for the Ed Sullivan Show. Y'all know where I'm going with this, right? We're talking about the Deauville Hotel in Miami Beach. So today marks 2 years since the Deauville was imploded, November 13th, 2022 to be exact. And we're going to take a good look at its full story, how it came to be, who made it famous, why it closed down, and ultimately, what led to its fall. You might want to get comfy for this one.
From Okeechobee ripples to the Gulf breeze, land of whispers, Spanish moss in the trees, the swamps, oranges and pirate wars embrace Florida's history. We set the pace. All
right, let's start with a bit of history. The Deauville opened its doors in 1957, designed by Melvin Grossman, a big-name architect at the time, known for that Miami modern, or as we call it, Memo style. Now, Miami Beach was already gaining steam as a hotspot for the wealthy and glamorous, but the Deauville really upped the game. This place was like a shining example of mid-century luxury. Picture this, a 17-story tower with the best view of the Atlantic, a sprawling pool, a beauty parlor, an ice skating rink. Yep, that's right. An ice skating rink in Miami Beach, and some of the top restaurants you could find in the area. You didn't just go to the Deauville to sleep. You went to see and be seen. It was all about the experience. But here's the thing. It wasn't just the luxury that made the Deauville iconic. It was the people who stayed there and the events that took place within those walls. Let's jump ahead to 1961. The Deauville had already built a name for itself, but this is the year that really puts it on the map for history buffs. In 1961, John F. Kennedy gave a speech at the Young Democrats convention right there in the hotel's famous Napoleon Ballroom. Just think about that for a second. You're sitting there, maybe sipping a cocktail, and here comes the future president of the United States talking politics, energizing the crowd. The Deauville became a political stage for the country's elite. But it wasn't just a political venue. Oh, no, the Deauville was about entertainment, too. And boy, did it deliver. Let's move forward to 1964. This is where the hotel goes from famous to legendary. You see, this is the year the Beatles came to Miami Beach. Now, for those of you who are Beatles fans, and I assume that's most of us, this is a huge moment. The Deauville is where the Fab Four filmed their second performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. They performed 6 songs to an audience of 70 million people across America. And yeah, that's million with Annam. The Deauville at that moment wasn't just a hotel anymore. It was the center of pop culture. And let me tell you, Beatlemania was no joke. Miami Beach was flooded with fans. The guys could barely move through the lobby because of the crowds. Just imagine being one of those people lucky enough to catch even a glimpse of them. That performance is still one of the most watched TV broadcasts of all time. Now, before we get into the more, let's say, complicated part of the story, I've got to mention some of the other big names who performed at the Deauville. Frank Sinatra, yep, he was there. And not just him, Sammy Davis Jr., Judy Garland, and so many others. The Deauville was basically a rotating door for the biggest names in entertainment. But like all good things, the glory days of the Deauville couldn't last forever. By the 2000s, the hotel was starting to show its age. It went through a few ownership changes, and honestly, it wasn't being maintained like it should have been. And then came 2017. This is where things really took a turn. There was an electrical fire that year, not a small one either. It caused a ton of damage, and the hotel had to shut down. Now you think maybe they'd fix it up, right? Especially given all that history, but no. That's when the legal battle started. The city of Miami Beach got into a pretty heated fight with the hotel's owners, the MemoryOcean family. We're talking millions of dollars in fines for code violations. The city wanted them to fix it up, but the owners, well, they didn't. It was kind of painful to watch, honestly. You had this iconic building just sitting there, crumbling. A lot of folks in the community were pretty upset. Preservationists tried to save it. They even filed petitions to keep the building standing. But it didn't go their way. The hotel was declared unsafe and demolition plans moved forward. And that brings us to November 13th, 2022. The Deauville was imploded. I mean, just like that, a building that had hosted JFK, the Beatles, Frank Sinatra, and so many other legends was reduced to rubble in a matter of seconds. Now, what's really interesting is what's happening, or should I say not happening, with the site. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, had plans to buy the land and build a huge 350-foot hotel and condo tower. But there was a little problem. Miami Beach has height restrictions, and his plan was a bit too ambitious. The city put the proposal up for a vote in 2022, and the residents shot it down. So now, here we are 2 years later, and it's still just an empty lot. A lot of people are wondering, what's next? Like, will Ross come back with a new plan? Will the land just sit there gathering dust? Who knows? So I learned pretty early on that buildings are more than just, well, buildings. They're like part of the family. You know, you see the same landmarks day after day, and they start to feel like an old friend. I think that's what makes it so hard for people to say goodbye to places like the Deauville. Now, don't get me wrong. I get it. Miami's got to grow, and there's a lot of pressure to, you know, keep up with the times. But man, there's something about losing a place with that much history that just doesn't sit right. It's like taking a bulldozer to the memories people have, the stories that make a place what it is. Growing up, we'd sit on the front porch swapping stories about old Florida, the ones that stick with you, make you feel rooted. A place like the Deauville, that's years of stories packed into one building. When you take that away, it's like ripping a chapter out of a book and expecting it to read the same. And look, I know some folks think we're just being sentimental here, like it's just a building, but maybe that's something people from big cities don't quite get. Places like the Deauville, they're touchstones. They remind us of a time when things were slower, simpler, a time when, hey, maybe people weren't in such a rush to tear down and build new every chance they got. I think deep down, people are craving that connection to something real, something they can count on to be there year after year. Now, I ain't trying to say we shouldn't embrace progress. We all know that things change. Heck, that's part of what makes life interesting. But there's a balance, right? We don't have to knock down every piece of history to make way for something shiny and new. I mean, think about how many folks rallied to save that place. There was a reason for that. People cared, not just because it was beautiful or famous, but because it represented something that mattered. So here's my thought. Maybe instead of just bulldozing these landmarks, we start thinking of ways to bridge the past and the future, give people a place where they can feel connected to what came before, even while we're moving forward, kind of like keeping one foot in tradition and the other in, you know, what's next. I think that's something we can all respect, whether we grew up in a tiny town or a big city. Anyway, those are my 2 cents. Maybe it's just that small town kid in me talking, but I think a little nostalgia every now and then. That's what keeps us human. All right. So if today's episode's got you curious to dig a little deeper into the Deauville story, and I mean, there's a lot of layers here. I've got some resources that'll set you on the right track. Now, where do we start? For anyone interested in the architectural history, the Miami Design Preservation League, MDPL, has a whole timeline and background on the Deauville. They've done the work to preserve stories and timelines of Miami's historical buildings, and they offer guides on Memo architecture, which is that unique post-war Miami modern style the Deauville helped define. The MDPL even has footage of the Deauville's implosion, which might hit you in the feels if you're a history lover like me. Check them out at mdpl.org. Now, if you're looking for some visuals, photos, postcards, and memorabilia, head over to Florida Memory. They have a collection that includes vintage photos and ads that give you a peek into what life at the Deauville was like in its prime. You'll find snapshots of the Beatles in Miami, old postcards showing off that iconic pool, and even images from the grand ballroom where they performed on the Ed Sullivan Show. Just search for Deauville Hotel on floridamemory.com. And if you just want a good old narrative that dives into the hotel's glamorous years, stories from past guests and employees reminiscing on the Deauville's prime, there's a detailed write-up on Ocean Drive's website, and they cover everything from the Beatles stay to memories from former employees who recall the bustling ballroom and the orange, yellow, and blue color schemes of the rooms. I've got to say, it gives you that you're there kind of feel. So if you want those firsthand stories, head over to Ocean Drive's Deauville Legacy page. So yeah, check those out if you want to keep this Deauville trip going. I'll drop links to all of them in the show notes. All right, folks, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Old Florida Now. Thanks for sticking around and letting me share the history of one of Miami Beach's most legendary spots. It's been 2 years since the Deauville was imploded, but its legacy, that's going to last a whole lot longer. Until next time, I'm Bo Carter, and I'll see you on our next journey through Florida's colorful past. Take care, y'all.